The diary hit the marble floor with a sound that echoed through the entire graduation hall, its pages splaying open like broken wings. My sister Victoria stood at the podium, her perfectly manicured fingers trembling as she held my second diary, the real one, while hundreds of our classmates turned to stare at me with expressions ranging from shock to disgust to barely concealed glee. "And here's the best part," Victoria announced, her voice carrying through the microphone with crystalline clarity. On March 15th, she wrote, "I practice my valedictorian speech every night in the mirror, even though I know Victoria deserves it more. I'm such a fraud." Except I never wrote that. I knew I never wrote that because I remembered this exact moment with perfect, agonizing clarity. I remembered the way the stage lights caught the tears in my mother's eyes. Not tears of sympathy for me, but disappointment that her problem child had embarrassed the family yet again. I remembered my father's jaw clenching as he stood up to leave, abandoning me in my moment of greatest humiliation. I remembered the way my boyfriend, ex-boyfriend, Daniel pushed through the crowd to get away from me as fast as possible after hearing Victoria read aloud fake entries about how I'd been stalking him and planning to trap him with pregnancy. But most of all, I remembered dying 3 hours later, alone in my apartment, after swallowing an entire bottle of pills because I couldn't face a world where everyone believed my sister's forged entries over my desperate protests of innocence. The thing about dying and coming back is that you remember everything with a clarity that burns. Every betrayal becomes etched in your mind like words carved in stone. Every moment of pain crystallizes into something you can examine from all angles, understanding finally, how thoroughly you were played. I stood up slowly from my seat in the third row, smoothing down my graduation gown with steady hands. This time, I wasn't the girl who'd sobbed and begged and tried to grab the diary from Victoria's hands. This time, I was someone else entirely. Someone who had been given a second chance and had spent the last 6 months preparing for this exact moment. "Please," Victoria said into the microphone, her voice dripping with false concern as she watched me stand. "I'm only doing this because I'm worried about her. These entries, they show someone who needs help." The crowd murmured, eating up her performance just as they had the first time. Victoria had always been the golden child. Beautiful, charismatic, able to make anyone believe anything she said. While I had worked twice as hard for half the recognition, she had glided through life on charm and lies, stealing my achievements and reframing them as her own, while painting me as the jealous, unstable sister who couldn't handle her success. I reached into my own graduation gown pocket and pulled out my phone, already cued to the right app. My fingers didn't shake as I pressed play on the recording I'd been saving for 3 months. God, writing in her style is exhausting. Victoria's recorded voice filled the auditorium through my phone's surprisingly powerful speakers, a special purchase I'd made just for this moment. But it'll be worth it when everyone sees what a pathetic loser she really is. Mom and Dad will finally disown her completely, and I'll get her trust fund too. The murmuring stopped. Victoria's face drained of color as her own voice continued from my phone. "Daniel's already mine anyway, but this will make sure he never looks at her again. And once everyone hears the part about her mental breakdown, no graduate school will touch her application. The valedictorian spot is mine." I walked toward the stage, holding my phone high so everyone could hear clearly. "That's a recording from March 14th, I said, my voice carrying without the need for a microphone. "The day before the entry you just read was supposedly written. Funny how my sister knew what I was going to write in my diary before I wrote it." But I wasn't done. This was just the beginning of what I'd prepared. The last 6 months since my rebirth had been a masterclass in patience and planning. When I'd woken up in my childhood bedroom on January 1st, 6 months before graduation, a full year before my original death, I'd known exactly what was coming. Victoria's escalating abuse, my parents' willful blindness, the systematic destruction of my life that would culminate in this very moment. The first time around, I'd been caught completely off guard. I'd trusted my family despite years of red flags. I'd kept a real diary full of my genuine thoughts and fears, never knowing that Victoria had been photographing pages, learning my handwriting, and planning to create a forgery that would destroy me. I'd been so desperate for my family's love that I'd ignored every warning sign, every small cruelty, every moment that should have told me they saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to Victoria's complete dominance. This time, I'd known better. This time, I'd prepared. That's fake! Victoria shrieked into the microphone, her composure finally cracking. She's using AI or something. Mom, Dad, tell them. Our parents stood up from their front row seats, and for a moment my heart clenched with the old hope that maybe, just maybe, they would choose me this time. But no, my father's face was red with rage directed at me, and my mother was already moving to comfort Victoria. Amelia, my father boomed, using his lawyer voice that had terrified me as a child. Stop this immediately. You're embarrassing yourself and this family. I laughed, actually laughed, because this time I'd expected nothing less. Embarrassing the family? I asked, pulling out a small remote from my other pocket. Let's talk about embarrassing the family. I clicked the remote and the enormous presentation screen behind Victoria lit up. The graduation committee had set it up for the valedictorian speech. My speech, actually, since I had the highest GPA despite Victoria's attempts to sabotage my grades. But she'd orchestrated this diary reading to happen first, to destroy my reputation before I could even reach the podium. The screen showed a bank statement, Victoria's bank statement showing deposit after deposit from our grandmother's account. The grandmother who had dementia, the grandmother whose power of attorney was supposed to be managed by my father. $200,000, I said conversationally as gasps rippled through the audience. Stolen over 2 years from a sick old woman. But here's the interesting part. Dad knew, didn't you? The next slide showed email exchanges between my father and Victoria, discussing how to hide the transfers, how to alter the books at my father's law firm where the estate was managed. That's enough! My father started toward the stage, but Dean Morrison and several security guards moved to block him. They'd been briefed, of course. I'd made sure of that. I'm not done, I said, my voice stronger now. The scared girl who died alone in that apartment was gone. In her place stood someone who understood that family could be the deadliest enemy of all. The next slide showed my mother's affair. Photos, credit card receipts for hotels, romantic dinners while my father was at work. The man she was seeing? Victoria's biological father. My mother had been having an affair for 24 years, and Victoria wasn't even my full sister. The auditorium erupted. Parents who'd come to see their children graduate were recording everything on their phones. The local news station, which always covered graduation, had their cameras trained on the screen. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was a prominent lawyer embezzling from his client, a society wife's decades-long deception, and Victoria? Well, Victoria's crimes were about to get much worse. Stop! Victoria screamed, actually stomping her foot like a child. This is all lies. She's crazy. Tell them about the diary. Tell them what she wrote. You mean what you wrote? I pulled out another piece of evidence, screenshots from Victoria's computer showing her practicing my handwriting, comparing it to pages from my real diary that she'd photographed. I installed a monitoring program on your laptop in February. Every keystroke, every search, every deleted file, I have it all. The screen changed again, showing Victoria's search history. How to forge someone's handwriting. What happens if you frame someone for stalking? How to make someone look mentally ill. Inheritance law when sibling is institutionalized. But the crown jewel was the video. Oh, the video was beautiful. It started playing automatically. Victoria in her room talking to her best friend Madison as she carefully wrote in the fake diary, I'm going to write that she's been stealing from Mom's jewelry box, Victoria said on the recording, her voice clear as day. Then I'll plant the jewelry in her room after I read this at graduation. The police will have to arrest her. God, I'm so smart. Madison laughed on the recording. You're evil. I love it. She deserves it for being born, Victoria replied. And even now, watching it again, the casual cruelty of that statement hit me like a physical blow. Mom told me once that she never wanted another baby. I was supposed to be the only one. Amelia ruined everything just by existing. The security guards were now actively holding my parents back as they tried to get to the stage. Victoria had dropped the microphone, her perfectly styled hair falling in her face as she looked around wildly for an escape route. But there was nowhere to go. Everyone had seen everything. Dean Morrison took the microphone. I think we need to postpone the graduation ceremony. Campus security, please escort the Henderson family off the premises. Ms. Amelia Henderson, please stay. We need to discuss several matters. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Wait, I said, and something in my voice made everyone freeze. There's one more thing. I pulled out the real diary, my actual diary from this timeline. The one I'd been keeping since January, but not hiding. The one I'd actually wanted Victoria to find and read. You see, I said, opening it to a marked page, I knew Victoria would try to steal my diary again. So I wrote this one specifically for her to find. Every entry was crafted to make her think she was learning my secrets, my weaknesses. But really, I was feeding her false information. I turned to a specific entry and read aloud, March 1st, I'm so worried about graduation. I have this terrible feeling Victoria is planning something. Maybe I should hide my real diary in my old hiding spot in the attic, behind the loose board near the window. Victoria's eyes widened in recognition. She had found that diary. She had believed every word. But that wasn't my real diary, I continued. That was a decoy. My real diary, the one with my actual thoughts, was never in the house at all. It was in a safety deposit box at the bank, along with copies of all the evidence I've shown today and much, much more. The screen changed one more time, showing a video of Victoria breaking into my room, searching frantically until she found the fake diary in the attic. Her face when she found it was triumphant, gleeful even. She'd flipped through it greedily, photographing every page, never realizing she was being recorded by the camera I'd hidden in the old dollhouse. Every single thing you thought you knew about me this year was a lie I wanted you to believe, I told her. Every weakness you thought you could exploit was bait. Every secret you thought you discovered was planted. You played yourself, Victoria, and the best part? I have 6 months of evidence showing you stalking. Me breaking into my room, stealing my things, and forging documents. Actual crimes with actual evidence. Victoria collapsed to her knees on the stage, the forged diary falling from her limp fingers. For the first time in both my lives, I saw real fear in her eyes. Not the fake tears she could summon at will, not the performative emotions she wore like masks, but genuine, bone-deep terror. The police are already on their way, I said quietly. Dean Morrison called them as soon as I showed him the evidence this morning. Fraud, identity theft, embezzlement, conspiracy, and theft are just the beginning. Oh, and Daniel? He was helping me the whole time. Turns out when you show someone proof that their girlfriend is planning to frame her sister for stalking him, he becomes very cooperative. Daniel stood up from his seat in the audience, giving me a small nod. We weren't together, we never would be, but he'd been instrumental in gathering evidence, especially the recordings from Victoria's phone when she thought she was alone with him. The things she'd said about me, about our parents, about her plans. He'd captured it all. You can't do this to me, Victoria screamed, mascara running down her cheeks in black rivers. I'm your sister. No, I said, and for the first time since dying, I felt truly free. You're the person who killed me. She didn't understand, of course. How could she? She didn't know that her cruelty had driven me to take my own life in another timeline. She didn't know that I'd come back with the knowledge of every horrible thing she would do, every lie she would tell, every moment of pain she would inflict. But I knew. And that knowledge had been my salvation. The police arrived then, walking through the stunned crowd of graduation attendees. Detective Martinez, whom I'd been working with for weeks, stepped onto the stage with his partner. Victoria Henderson, you're under arrest for fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit embezzlement. You have the right to remain silent. As they cuffed her, Victoria looked at our parents desperately. Mom, Dad, help me! But our parents were being escorted out by security, their own legal troubles just beginning. The embezzlement from our grandmother would destroy my father's career and probably land him in prison. My mother's decades of deception would cost her everything in the divorce that was surely coming. And me? I stood on that stage watching the family that had tormented me for 22 years finally face consequences for their actions. The crowd was silent now, processing what they'd witnessed. Some looked at me with sympathy, others with a kind of awe. but I didn't care about their opinions anymore. Dean Morrison approached me carefully. Ms. Henderson, are you all right? This must be incredibly difficult. I turned to him with a genuine smile. Actually, Dean Morrison, I've never been better, and I believe I have a valedictorian speech to give. He looked around at the chaos, police, security, crying parents, gossiping students, and shook his head. I think we should postpone. No, I said firmly. I've earned this, I've worked for this, and I won't let them take one more thing from me. Something in my expression must have convinced him because he nodded slowly. Clear the stage, he announced. We're going to take a 30-minute recess, and then Ms. Amelia Henderson will deliver her valedictorian address. As the police led Victoria away, she turned back to look at me one last time. How? She mouthed, her face a mask of incomprehension. How did you know? I didn't answer. I couldn't tell her that I'd lived through this once before, that her successful destruction of my life had been so complete, it had killed me. I couldn't tell her that the universe or God or sheer cosmic irony had given me a second chance to make things right. Instead, I picked up my real diary, the one from the safety deposit box, and turned to the last entry I'd written. June 1st, I read aloud, my voice carrying across the gradually emptying auditorium. Today, I graduate summa cum laude from university. Today, I give my valedictorian speech. Today, my tormentors face justice. And today, for the first time in my life, both of them, I am free. The 30-minute recess passed in a blur. I sat in the dean's office, sipping water and ignoring the flood of messages on my phone. Some were from reporters who'd already gotten wind of the story. Others were from classmates expressing shock, support, or simply gossip-hungry curiosity. I responded to none of them. My grandmother's nurse called. I'd made sure she was watching the live stream. Your grandmother is lucid today, she said. She saw everything. She wants you to know she's proud of you and that she's pressing charges herself. That almost broke my composure. Grandmother had always been the only family member who'd shown me genuine kindness, and Victoria had exploited her illness to rob her blind. In my first life, grandmother had died thinking I was the disappointment, the problem child, the one who brought shame to the family. This time, she knew the truth. When I returned to the stage, the auditorium had been reorganized. The police were gone, along with my family and about a third of the original crowd. But those who remained seemed more focused, more attentive. They weren't here for a show anymore. They were here to hear what the girl who'd just exposed a massive family conspiracy had to say. I stood at the podium where Victoria had stood an hour earlier, reading her forged diary. The irony wasn't lost on me. But unlike her performance, I had something real to say. Fellow graduates, I began, my voice steady and clear. I had a different speech prepared. Something safe and inspirational about reaching for our dreams and making our mark on the world. But after what you've witnessed today, I think we need to talk about something else. We need to talk about survival. The audience leaned forward slightly, invested now in a way they wouldn't have been for a typical graduation speech. We're told that family is everything, that blood is thicker than water, that we should forgive those closest to us no matter what they do. But I'm here to tell you that sometimes the people who share your DNA are the ones most capable of destroying you. Sometimes survival means recognizing that the call is coming from inside the house. A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd, but most remained silent, absorbing every word. For 22 years, I believed that if I just tried harder, achieved more, was better, my family would love me. I got straight A's, but my sister got the praise. I won scholarships, but my parents attended her recitals instead of my award ceremonies. I excelled and they called me an overachiever. She coasted and they called her gifted. I paused, looking out at the sea of faces, my fellow graduates, who were about to enter a world that could be cruel and unfair. But here's what I learned. You cannot earn love that was never there to begin with. You cannot achieve your way into a family that sees you as competition rather than kin. And sometimes, the greatest act of self-love is walking away from those who would rather see you destroyed than successful. The silence in the auditorium was complete now, heavy with the weight of recognition. How many of them had their own Victorias, their own parents who played favorites, their own family members who smiled while sharpening knives for their backs? Today, you saw my sister try to destroy me with a forged diary, claiming I was mentally ill, a stalker, a thief. What you don't know is that this wasn't the first time. The gaslighting started when we were children. Every achievement I earned was somehow credited to her. Every mistake she made was somehow my fault. I spent years believing I was crazy, that I was remembering things wrong, that I was the problem. I pulled out a small notebook, not a diary, but a record I'd started keeping in February of this timeline. So I started documenting everything, every conversation, every incident, every small cruelty. Not because I was planning revenge, but because I needed proof that I wasn't losing my mind. And when I finally had enough evidence, when I finally understood the pattern, I did something I should have done years ago. I chose myself. The dean was watching from the side of the stage, his expression thoughtful. Several professors had joined him, and I could see Dr. Williams, my psychology professor, nodding slowly. Choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. And for those of you sitting here who know what it's like to be the scapegoat, the black sheep, the one who never quite measures up no matter how hard you try, I want you to know something. It's not you. It was never you, and you deserve better. I took a breath, feeling the weight of my next words. 6 months ago, I made a decision. I decided that I would no longer be a victim of my circumstances. I decided that if my family wanted to play games, I would learn the rules better than they ever could. And I decided that my graduation day would not be remembered for my sister's lies, but for the truth finally coming to light. What I couldn't tell them was that 6 months ago, I had literally died and been reborn. That I had been given the ultimate do-over, the chance to replay the game with full knowledge of everyone's cards. But even without that supernatural advantage, the message remained the same. You don't have to accept abuse, even from family, especially from family. To my fellow graduates who come from loving, supportive families, cherish them. You have no idea how rare and precious that is. And to those who, like me, have had to survive your own blood, know that your real family is waiting for you out there. They're the friends who show up at 3 a.m. when you're crying. They're the mentors who see your potential when no one else does. They're the chosen family you build with your own hands and heart. I could see some people wiping away tears. Others were recording, probably posting clips to social media with hashtags about toxic families and survival. Let them. Let this moment ripple outward and maybe, just maybe, reach someone who needed to hear it. As we leave this institution and enter the wider world, we're going to face challenges. Some of them will be external, job searches, economic uncertainty, a changing world. But some of them will be internal, the voices of those who told us we weren't good enough, smart enough, worthy enough. I'm here to tell you that those voices lie. I looked directly at one of the cameras broadcasting the ceremony. Victoria, if you're watching this from custody, I want you to know something. You didn't break me. You killed me, metaphorically speaking, but I came back stronger. Every cruel word you said, every sabotage you attempted, every lie you told, they all became the fuel for my resurrection. So thank you, sister, for teaching me that sometimes the best revenge truly is massive success. A ripple of applause started, but I raised my hand to continue. But success isn't just about revenge. It's about becoming who you were meant to be without the weight of other people's expectations and cruelty holding you down. Today, as we graduate, we have the opportunity to shed those weights, to leave behind the voices that don't serve us, to walk into our futures unburdened by the past. The screen behind me, which had shown all that damning evidence, now displayed something different. Acceptance letters, Harvard Law, Yale Medicine, Stanford Business, all the graduate programs I'd been accepted to. Programs that Victoria had tried to sabotage by sending fake emails withdrawing my applications, not knowing I'd been monitoring her computer, and had immediately contacted the schools to explain the situation. Despite everything my family did to stop me, I've been accepted to every graduate program I applied to, not because I'm special or gifted or any of the things my sister claimed to be, but because I worked hard, documented everything, and refused to let anyone else write my story. The applause was genuine now, growing stronger. But I wasn't finished. And for those of you wondering about the legal implications of what you witnessed today, yes, there will be consequences. My father will likely be disbarred and face prison time for embezzlement. My mother will lose everything in the divorce. Victoria will have a criminal record that will follow her forever. And me? I'll be starting Harvard Law in the fall with a full scholarship and a story that no one will ever forget. I pulled out one last document, a legal notice I'd been served that morning. Oh, and this morning I was notified that my grandmother, in her lucid state, has changed her will. The entire family trust, approximately $12 million, will go to me upon her passing, with Victoria specifically disinherited for theft and elder abuse. I plan to use it to start a foundation for people escaping abusive families, because everyone deserves a second chance at life. The auditorium erupted. Standing ovation, cheers, some people crying. It was overwhelming and cathartic, and everything I hadn't gotten the first time around when I died alone and unmourned. In conclusion, I said, having to raise my voice over the applause, to the class of 2024, I leave you with this. You are not required to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. You are not obligated to maintain relationships that drain you. And you are absolutely, unequivocally worthy of love, success, and happiness, no matter what anyone, including family, has told you. I stepped back from the podium, and Dean Morrison took my place to officially confer degrees. But the ceremony felt different now, charged with an energy that hadn't been there before. As each graduate walked across the stage, there was a sense of possibility, of liberation. When my name was called, Amelia Henderson, summa cum laude, valedictorian, the applause was deafening. I walked across that stage not as the broken girl who had swallowed pills in despair, but as someone who had literally conquered death itself to stand here. Afterward, as people filed out, dozens of students approached me. Some shared their own stories of family abuse. Others asked for advice. A few just wanted to hug me and tell me I was brave. Dr. Williams, my psychology professor, pulled me aside. That was remarkable, Amelia. Have you considered writing about your experience? I think it could help a lot of people. I smiled, thinking of the book I'd already started writing, documenting not just the abuse, but the recovery, the planning, the sweet satisfaction of justice served cold. I have, actually. I'm calling it The Diary She Never Found, the real story of surviving a narcissistic family. He handed me his card. I have some publishing contacts who would be very interested. What you did today, it's going to ripple outward in ways you can't imagine. As the auditorium emptied, I stood there for a moment, alone on the stage where everything had changed. In my first life, this stage had been the site of my greatest humiliation. In this life, it had become the platform for my greatest triumph. My phone buzzed with a notification from the bank. The emergency freeze on my family's access to my accounts, something I'd arranged months ago, had prevented them from draining my savings in retaliation. Another buzz, an email from Harvard Law's Dean of Admissions personally congratulating me on my speech and expressing excitement about having me join their program. But the message that mattered most came from an unknown number. I saw your graduation speech online. I'm 17 and my family is like yours. You've given me hope that I can survive this. Thank you. That made everything worth it. As I walked off the stage, I passed by the spot where Victoria had dropped the forged diary. Pages were still scattered on the floor, her careful forgeries now nothing more than evidence in a criminal case. I picked up one page, scanning her attempt at my handwriting, her fabricated entries about my supposed mental illness. In my first life, these words had destroyed me. In this life, they had destroyed her instead. I crumpled the page and tossed it in the trash where it belonged. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Groups of graduates were taking photos, families were celebrating, and life was moving forward. My family wasn't there, of course. They were dealing with lawyers and bail hearings and the complete implosion of their carefully constructed lives. But I wasn't alone. Daniel approached, not as a romantic interest, but as a friend who'd helped me when I needed it most. "How are you feeling?" he asked. I considered the question. How was I feeling? I had just destroyed my entire family in public. I had exposed years of secrets and crimes. I had burned every bridge back to my old life. "Free," I said finally. I feel free. He nodded. What now? Now I start over. For real this time. No more pretending they might change, no more hoping for love that doesn't exist. Just me, my future, and the family I choose to build. As I walked toward my car, I passed a group of reporters who'd been waiting outside. They rushed toward me, microphones extended, questions flying. But I just smiled and kept walking. The story had been told, the truth had been revealed. The rest was just noise. That night in my apartment, the same one where I'd died in another timeline, I sat at my desk with a cup of tea and my real diary. Not the decoy, not the evidence, but my actual thoughts and feelings. I wrote, June 1st evening, today, gave my family exactly what they'd always given me, the truth of who they really are. Victoria wanted to be famous. Now she is, as a cautionary tale about jealousy and cruelty. My parents wanted to maintain their perfect image. Now everyone knows the rot beneath the surface. They wanted me gone. They got their wish. I'm gone from their lives forever, but I'm more present in my own life than I've ever been. Tomorrow, I start therapy with someone who specializes in family trauma. Next week, I begin preparing for law school. In a month, I'm taking a solo trip to Europe, something I'd always dreamed of but never did because Victoria would have sabotaged it, or my parents would have guilt-tripped me out of it. I don't know if what happened to me, the dying and coming back, was real or if it was just the most vivid nightmare that shocked me into action. But either way, the result is the same. I'm alive, I'm free, and I'm never looking back. To anyone reading this who recognizes themselves in my story, you can survive this, you can escape. You can build a life so beautiful that the people who hurt you become nothing more than cautionary tales you tell at dinner parties. Don't wait for them to change. Don't wait for them to love you. Don't wait for them to see your worth. See it yourself. Claim it yourself. Save yourself. Because sometimes the plot twist isn't that your family finally loves you. Sometimes the plot twist is that you finally love yourself enough to leave. I closed the diary and stood up, looking around my apartment. In my first life, this had been my tomb. In this life, it was my launching pad. My phone buzzed with messages from new friends, fellow graduates who'd been inspired by my story, professors offering support, and strangers on the internet who'd seen the viral clips of the graduation ceremony. My story was already spreading, already reaching people who needed to hear it. Somewhere across town, Victoria was probably in a holding cell, trying to convince anyone who would listen that she was the victim. My father was probably frantically calling in favors from judge friends, not yet understanding that his career was over. My mother was probably crying on her boyfriend's shoulder, playing the wronged wife despite decades of deception. But their stories were no longer my concern. I'd written them out of my life with the same deliberate care Victoria had used to try to write me out of existence. The difference was, I'd used the truth. 6 months ago, I'd been given a second chance at life. Not just to survive, but to thrive. Not just to escape, but to expose. Not just to heal, but to help others heal too. The girl who had swallowed those pills, who had died believing she was worthless and alone, was gone. In her place stood someone who understood that sometimes the greatest tragedy isn't death, it's living a life defined by other people's cruelty. But the greatest triumph? The greatest triumph is writing your own story in your own words, with your own hand. And this time, no one would ever take my diary or my life away from me again. As midnight approached, marking the official end of graduation day, I stood on my balcony looking out over the city lights. Somewhere out there were other Amelias, other victims of family abuse, other people who'd been taught to doubt their own worth. My story was for them. My survival was proof that they could survive too. My triumph was a beacon saying, you are not crazy, you are not worthless, you are not alone. The rebirth, the second chance, the supernatural knowledge of what was coming, that had been my advantage. But the courage to use it, the strength to plan and execute justice, the resilience to stand on that stage and tell the truth, that had been all me. And that's the part that anyone could replicate. You didn't need to die and come back to stand up to your abusers. You just needed to decide that you deserved better and then make a plan to get it. My phone rang, an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Is this Amelia Henderson? The voice was old, refined, familiar, but not quite placeable. Yes, who is this? This is your great Aunt Margaret, your grandmother's sister. I saw the graduation video. I've been estranged from the family for 30 years because I saw what they were and refused to participate. I'm calling to say, well done, my dear, and to ask if you'd like to have lunch next week. It's time you knew the family members worth knowing. I smiled, a real, genuine smile. I'd love that. After we hung up, I realized that this too was part of my new beginning. The toxic family members had been excised, but that didn't mean I was alone. There were others, estranged relatives, found family, chosen connections, waiting to fill my life with the love I'd always deserved. The city stretched out before me, full of possibilities I'd never allowed myself to dream of before. Law school, the foundation I would start, the book I would write, the people I would help. It all lay ahead like a promise. Victoria had tried to steal my story by forging my diary. My parents had tried to erase my existence by favoring her. In my first life, they had succeeded in driving me to death, but death, it turned out, was not the end of my story. It was just the beginning of my revenge. And what sweet, satisfying, perfectly legal revenge it was.